Welcome to yet another riveting edition of You Comment, We Respond.
Why you gotta be like that?
Because it's riveting.
Okay. I feel like it was sarcastic, that's all.
It wasn't.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it was. I don't know. It is riveting. You're excited. Anyway, the first hand includes an exciting man and an exciting player. That's Phil Laak.
Yes, riveting.
And it was called Phil Laak is Crazy. Check it out right up there. It's a hand in which Phil Laak had Queen 7 suited in the Premier League. For some reason, decided to limp under the gun.
Why?
I don't know. Brian Rast raised in early position with Ace 8. Phil Laak then called. The flop was deuce 4-5 or something of that nature with a couple diamonds on there. It went check check. The turn was a 10. It went check check. The river was a 10, bringing a third diamond. So it's 10-10, deuce 4-5, something like that. Laak has Queen 7 of spades and Rast has Ace 8. And Laak moves in for like 9 times the pot.
Yeah.
It's a crazy, crazy, crazy bet. A crazy hand because Rast then tanks forever, says a lot of funny things, and eventually calls.
Yeah.
Ace high.
And of course, it's a $125,000 buy-in as the Premier League, and Rast needs to win this hand. He can fold and it's fine, but if he calls and he's out here, he's basically done with the Premier League and he's out to the $125K.
It's a huge moment.
It's a huge call for Rast.
Yeah.
He can fold and survive this, but he chooses not to, and that's what makes it so cool.
Yeah.
Here's what some of the people had to say. Michael Peck says, do you guys think Phil is ever doing this with a bluff that beats Rast? By the way, this was echoed in a lot of comments, this question. Could he ever be shoving his ace-jack, ace-9 to get folds out of Rast's ace-king, ace-queen, i.e., I know Rast probably has ace-high, and I want to try to win against all of his ace-highs, not just the ones I happen to beat. If so, then this call is even tougher to make. It'd be so much easier to call it off with ace-king, since you don't have to worry about Phil potentially bluffing with the best hand.
I don't think so. I kind of don't think he's doing it with those hands. Also, I think he probably raises those pre-flop most of the time.
Yeah, he probably does. I agree. He may just think he has enough showdown value where he can just check. Maybe Rast has king queen sometimes. Maybe Rast has worse aces. It seems like, but it's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
He's weird.
It's an interesting point.
Yeah, I like it as a question for sure. Boy, that would be pretty brutal for Rast to turn over ace 8 and lose to ace 9.
Yeah, that would be the best value bet of all time.
It would be. It would not be, of course.
I know,
but it would be the greatest bluff working out of all time, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be. It seems very, very unlikely, and you can see in Rast's whole talking about it, it's not something he ever really considers.
No, and it would be hard to, as Phil Laak, consider that in that moment. You would probably just be thinking about your showdown value. You wouldn't be thinking, I have to get him off his slightly bigger aces sometimes.
Right. Instead, now we're trying to get him off all his aces and his king highs as well. It's different.
Right.
Okay. Even his queen highs, by the way.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, TT Everywhere 97 says, I just hate Laak's pre-flop play.
Well, yeah.
Limping queen 7 is just bad. You should fold, but it's okay to raise this as a bluff, and you can let your hand go if you get 3-bet. So far, so good.
Yeah.
Calling a raise is even worse. Yes. What good hands do you have in this spot? It makes some sense to 3-bet again as a bluff if you think Rast is opening wide.
Which he is.
Yeah, it says it appears so. But queen 7 has such bad equity and plays so badly post-flop that it calls the worst possible play. So far, so good. You are behind a lot of hands, and even if you are ahead on the flop or turn, you can be bluffed off your hand. Your flushes are good, but not great. You can't hit straights. A 7 can be beat by a7 or king 7, etc.
These are all good points.
I mean,
we hated Phil Laak's pre-flop play. I hate the whole way he played this hand. I mean, the shove is cool and fun, but it's not good. That's not a good play.
I mean, it's the best part of the hand for him, honestly. But it is still a disaster to play queen 7.
I mean, it's Phil Laak. He's a lovable goof, and sometimes he does stuff like this, and it's suboptimal, I guess is the way to put it.
Is he maybe trying to create these like viral hands for his brand or something like that? No, because you don't know how it's going to turn out until you get to the river.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think so.
So you're not limp. Why would you limp queen 7 suited under the gun, Phil?
I think Phil Laak
or any position.
Phil Laak might just be as weird as he presents himself as being. He might just be that weird.
Maybe.
And part of that is limping queen 7 suited under the gun and playing weird.
He doesn't normally do that, though. He
does some weird stuff. There's a hand against Scott Seaver where he has 4 deuce against aces or something like that.
I think he's in the blind, though, at least, isn't he?
No, he plays it bad and weird. We're going to do that one someday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Viktor Blom goes nuts.
He does.
This is back when Viktor Blom had the crazy hair.
Check it out right up there.
Yep, indeed. So he opened with king deuce of diamonds in middle position. We don't know why, but because he's Viktor Blom.
Because that's a value hand for him.
Yes. Munz, do you remember what Munz's first name is?
Something.
Something. Starts with an S anyway.
He's European.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
So he's got a7 off. He's an amateur. He 3-bets the button with it. Whatever. Blom calls. The flop is ace, ace-3 with 2 clubs. No one has a club. Blom checks. Munz bets 9,000. And Blom check raises, I believe it's to 59,000?
58,000.
58,000.
With king high.
Crazy. Munz clicks it back to 108,000.
126,000.
126,000, so almost clicking back.
Half of Blom's stack.
And then Blom moves in for the full 260,000, which Munz calls pretty quickly with his trip aces.
Yeah.
And just like that, Blom is out of the EPT event. Or it's the World Series of Poker Europe?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a weird hand.
Very strange hand. Here's what some of you had to say about it. Dave Klein says, one thing that everyone is failing to mention is this. This was the first sighting of Isildur in live play. At the point of the broadcast, it was still only rumored that this was in fact Isildur. Any assumed reads people are having based on Isildur's online image mean nothing in this case. Isildur was still an online ghost up until this very table. All he was at this point was some crazy aggressive unknown kid at this tourney.
Well, that would make Munz play worse, but if maybe Munz decided it was Isildur based on what he saw Viktor Blom do? I mean, I'm sure this wasn't the first crazy thing Viktor Blom did at this table, right?
I mean, as long as we know he's a crazy aggressive kid, does it really matter whether it's Isildur or not? As long as we know we can click back, trip aces, and sometimes he's going to move in with a worse hand somehow, then it's fine, right?
I mean, it's a weird play by Munz, to be fair.
It is bizarre.
He's usually supposed to be behind there when he gets it in on a 4-bet or a 5-bet.
I mean, if you're Munz and you get raised there and you decide you're not folding your trip aces, which is reasonable to not fold them, of course, then it seems very strange to re-raise rather than call and let him continue. But I guess what we're trying to do, if we're thinking about it, is represent a bluff. This is something we talked about in the hand, right? But if we just call, we always kind of have trip aces, right? All right. Interesting stuff, though. All right, moving on. Ryan Stecken says, that's an easy one. We have the nut backdoor flush draw. Ship it. I guess there was a diamond on the flop.
There must have been.
And he says, level wars don't work against amateurs. Excellent point, Ryan Stecken.
That is a really good point. So Viktor Blom was trying to say, even if you have trip aces, I'm repping essentially a full house here, and you're drawing nearly dead against me.
Right.
So that's, how else could I have anything, right? When I 5-bet when I don't seemingly have any fold equity. But that doesn't matter if this guy isn't really thinking on that level. It doesn't matter at all.
It doesn't, for sure. And the other thing to remember is, Munz 3-bet.
Yeah.
So usually if he has an ace, it's going to be way better than ace 7.
Yeah.
Even as an amateur, that's really weird for an amateur or anybody to 3-bet ace 7 off when they don't need to. I mean, some players will do it because they have a blocker, maybe because it's Blom, you're doing it for value.
Right.
Sure, but it's not a normal play. It's not a normal hand. It's a bluff when you do it, right? And Munz is sort of ultimately turning this into great value for himself.
He did a good job of that.
You'd expect him to have, ace queen plus usually. And so not that many aces, but aces that would never fold to the ship anyway.
But to Ryan Stecken's point, that's something that everybody needs to keep in mind. What level is your opponent thinking on? Because maybe this play is awesome against a guy who's thinking on your level, but against this guy, maybe not.
Right, and in fact, almost certainly not.
All right, the final hand is, did Phil Hellmuth get this right? You can check that out by clicking up here. Maybe some of you will tell us if he got this right or not. Anyway, in this hand, in a high-stakes poker game, Antonio limps under the gun with ace-queen of spades. Phil, for some reason, limps king, deuce of spades in middle position. There's a ton of other players in the hand.
Nobody cares.
The flop is 5-6-7 with 2 spades. Dwan bets out. Antonio calls. Phil overcalls. The turn is the 8 of spades, bringing a 4 straight and the flush. Dwan checks. Antonio bets. Phil calls. They both have flushes. Nut flush for second nut flush. The river is a 10 of hearts, inconsequential. Dwan's out of the hand already. Antonio bets pretty big, 32K into 40K. Phil tanks for a while and ends up calling and losing the hand.
Yep. So, here's a few comments we liked.
All right.
Or when I say, we pick our favorite comments, whatever, things we think are interesting. Still trying to help, who, by the way, is a frequent commenter, and we appreciate it.
We do appreciate that.
Like your comments, sir. Or ma'am, by the way. Miss.
Whoever,
Mrs.,
whatever,
Mrs.,
whoever.
Mr. Okay. I like a raise on the turn more a bit than a raise on the river. When we raise the turn, we at least have a few things going for us.
We're talking about Phil, right?
Gotta be.
Yeah.
Number 1, we can get value from a worse flush. 2, we can charge the lone ace of spades or fold out the equity. 3, we can comfortably call a 3-bet. All these things are true on the turn, but none are true on the river after Antonio bets so big.
Okay, so I take a couple issues. The first one is minor. I don't think the lone ace of spades shows up in Antonio's hand very often. We did talk about that a little bit. The only way he can ever really have that is if he has 2 aces, and he probably doesn't even play 2 aces that way. So it's very unlikely for Antonio to have the lone ace of spades. Also, comfortably call a 3-bet? I don't think so. On the turn, if Antonio 3-bets and we raise, I wouldn't consider that a comfortable call.
It's not comfortable at all. Now Antonio either has the nut blocker or the nuts. That's it.
Yeah.
And when I say the nuts, I mean the nut flush, actually, to be clear. Because, the nuts is a straight flush. But, he could have those things, too. But, we're beat by all value. We're not comfortably calling any 3-bets. We can only beat bluffs. And, by the way, they're bluffs that we can never improve against.
Right.
So we're just drawing dead to all value.
Yeah, so I like your points, and I think on the turn, things can be a little bit wider than they are on the river. That's just how poker is. But definitely, I wouldn't be comfortable if I were Phil and Antonio bets the turn and I raise and then he 3-bets me. I'm thinking I'm dead a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think Phyllis probably would raise fold there.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to do that because Antonio's capable of bluffing at least. So this way we get to, because we're in position, we get to call and we get to see what Antonio does, and we can raise if we want to. Maybe if he bets small, we could consider raising because he does have other flushes in his range for sure.
Yeah.
And if he bets big like he did, we can just call and know that sometimes we win and sometimes we lose.
Yep.
That's fine. Antonio, we really thought, had more nut flushes in his range than non-nut flushes in his range.
Right, or at least very close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, finally, Mark Testart, by the way, he's going to be very upset about everything we've just been saying, says, Dear poker guys, great hand analysis, as usual.
Thank you.
Thank you. But, and here's all caps, please learn the meaning of the phrase the nuts. Sincerely yours, your favorite Aussie listener. He goes on in many, many other comments to talk about how we say the nut flush when there's still when a straight flush is possible, like we just were, in fact, and how that's not correct because nuts means best possible hand, and the nut flush when the straight flush is possible is not the best possible hand. So we want to respond to that.
Okay, so when we say nut flush, we mean the ace-high flush.
Correct.
That's what nut flush means.
That is what it means, and here's why. Because a flush is actually a different rank of hand than a straight flush. A straight flush beats hands that flushes do not beat. Flushes lose to quads and they lose to full houses, but straight flushes beat both of those things. So it's actually different. By the way, a royal flush also a different rank of hand.
Right.
So when you have the nut straight, you can have the nut straight on a non and have that not be the nuts, right? Because it'd be 3 spades on the board, but you have the best possible.
You could have the nut straight on a 7, 7, 7, 8, 9 board,
right.
And it's not a good hand, but it is the nut straight.
You do have Jack 10. It's still the best possible straight. The nut flush, the best possible flush, is the ace high flush. Then there's also the nut straight flush, which is different because there sometimes can be other straight flushes available, right?
So yeah, that was well explained. Thank you, Jonathan.
Well, you're welcome. So we appreciate your Aussie, enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But we think you're wrong.
And we like kangaroos.
We do. Well, the babies.